Johanna Spyri's Heidi. Adapted by Florence Hayes, illustrated by Erika Weihs. From the Dandelion Library. Random House, New York. Copyright 1946. One clear sunny morning in June, two figures could be seen climbing a narrow mountain path in the Swiss Alps. One was a tall, strong-looking girl named Deet, the other a 5-year-old child whom she was leading by the hand, and whose little cheeks glowed bright red through her sunburnt skin. And this was hardly to be wondered at, for in spite of the hot June sun, the child was bundled up as if to keep off the bitter frost. After an hour's climb, they came to the hamlet of Dorfli, halfway up the mountain, which had once been Deet's home. Heads popped out from all of the doors. "Hello, Deet! Where are you going?" her old friends wanted to know. Deet did not pause to reply. She held tight to the child's hand and hurried on. But when her friend Barbel called, "Wait a minute, Deet. If you're going up the mountain, I'll walk with you," Deet stopped. The child immediately let go her hand and sat down on the ground. "Are you tired, Heidi?" asked her companion. "No, I'm hot," answered the child. "We shall soon get to the top now. You must walk bravely on a little longer and take good long steps, and in another hour we shall be there," said Deet. Now Barbel joined them and walked on ahead with Deet, while Heidi wandered behind them. "Where are you off to with the little girl? It's your sister's child, isn't it?" asked Barbel. "Yes, I'm taking her to live with her grandfather," Deet answered. "With the Alm-Uncle, Deet!" exclaimed Barbel. "Have you lost your senses? You know what he's like. Everybody's afraid of him. He'll make you take her home again." Deet tossed her head. "He can't do that. He's her grandfather. I've taken care of the child since her mother died, and I'm not going to give up the good position I've been offered, just for her sake. And I certainly can't take her with me." "Why? Where are you going?" "To Frankfurt," answered Deet. "Well, I'm glad I am not that child," exclaimed Barbel. "The old man up there looks wild, and his bushy brows and his great beard. He never sets foot in church, and when he comes down to the village, everybody keeps out of his way." "He's her grandfather, and he's got to take care of her," Deet insisted. "Why does he live as he does?" asked Barbel. "They say when he was a young man, he got in with evil company and lost his farm and everything he had," Deet answered. "His parents died of grief. Then he himself disappeared, and nobody heard from him until years later he came back with a young son, Tobias. When he found all doors closed to him, he moved to Dorfli." "Why is he called the Alm-Uncle?" Barbel wanted to know. "Our family called him Uncle because his son was married to my sister Adelaide, and soon the whole village called him Uncle. When Tobias was killed in an accident, leaving my sister and Heidi alone, people said it was a judgment upon the uncle. He grew bitter and moved to the top of Alm Mountain, vowing he would never come down. That's why people call him the Alm-Uncle." "Well," exclaimed Barbel when she heard this, "how you can take the child to live with him, I don't know." At this she turned toward a little hut in a hollow and said, "I have to stop here to see about some spinning. Good luck." Trailing behind Deet and Barbel while they talked, Heidi had made friends with a young goat-herd, Peter, who lived in a hut halfway up the Alm. Peter was 11 years old. He knew many places where there were good shrubs for his goats to nibble, and he was in the habit of leading his flock aside from the beaten path. At first Heidi had watched Peter as he sprang nimbly here and there on his bare feet, driving his goats up the steep mountainside. Then she tried to follow him. It was hot, though, and her clothes were too heavy. All at once she sat down on the ground, and as fast as her little fingers could move, she began pulling off her red woolen scarf and her shoes and stockings. Then the dresses came off, all the dresses Deet had put on her to save the trouble of carrying them. Now Heidi stood up, clad only in a light petticoat, and stretched out her little bare arms with glee. She put all her clothes together in a tidy heap and went jumping and climbing after Peter and the goats. Deet was very cross when she saw what Heidi had done and scolded her. She made Peter go back and pick up the clothes and carry them the rest of the way. At the end of another hour's climb, Heidi and Deet and Peter reached the almuncle's hut on the top of the mountain. On a bench before the hut sat the old man, smoking his pipe and looking over the valley below. Heidi went straight to him and said, "Good evening, grandfather." "What's the meaning of this?" he asked gruffly. "Good evening, uncle," said Deet, stepping forward. "I brought Tobias's little girl to you. I've done my duty by her. Now you must do yours." "So," said the old man, "what can a child do with me up here? What if she begins to fret for you?" "That's your affair," retorted Deet. "If harm comes to her, you will be answerable." At that, the old man rose, his eyes flashing. "Be off with you," he thundered, "and do not let me see your face again in a hurry." "Goodbye, then," said Deet quickly, "and goodbye to you too, Heidi," and she turned and almost ran down the mountain. While the almuncle sat down to think, Heidi ran off to investigate her new surroundings. She peeped into the shed where the goats were kept. She went behind the hut to the tall fir trees and listened to the wind blowing through their branches. When she came back, her grandfather was still sitting on his bench, puffing away at his pipe. She walked up to him. "What is it you want?" he asked. "I want to see what you have inside the house," answered Heidi. "Bring your bundle of clothes in with you," he said, rising and opening the door. "I shan't want them any more," was her prompt answer. The old man turned and looked at her. "And why shall you not want them any more?" he asked. "Because I want to go about like the goats with their thin, light legs." "Well, you can do so if you like," said her grandfather, "but bring the things in. We must put them in the cupboard." The hut had only one large room. Heidi took it in at a glance. The table, the chair, the old man's bed, the kettle hanging over the fireplace. A door in the wall opened onto a cupboard. On one shelf were dishes, on another bread, cheese, and dried meat. On the third, the uncle's clothes. Heidi pushed her bundle to the back of this shelf. She looked carefully around the room and asked, "Where am I to sleep, grandfather?" "Wherever you like," he answered. She saw a ladder that reached to the floor above and quickly climbed up. There was a hayloft with a large round window overlooking the valley. "Oh, it's lovely. I shall sleep up here, grandfather," she called down. "But I'll need a sheet," and she began to gather the sweet-scented hay. Together they arranged a bed with hay for a mattress and two thick sacks for a sheet and a cover. "I wish it were night so I could get into this lovely bed now," Heidi said. "Hadn't we better eat first?" grandfather asked. Heidi followed him down the ladder and watched him go to the hearth and swing the kettle over the fire. Then he put some cheese on a long fork and held it over the flame, turning it until it was toasted a nice golden yellow. Heidi set the table. "What will you do for a seat?" grandfather asked. Heidi ran to the hearth and fetched a small three-legged stool, but it was so low she could not reach the table. Grandfather filled a bowl with warm milk and set it on the chair, and drew it up before Heidi, where she sat on her low stool. Then he laid the toasted cheese on some bread and told her to eat. After which he sat down on the corner of the table and began his own meal. Heidi soon emptied her bowl. "It's the best milk I ever have drank," she said. Grandfather filled her bowl again. When they had finished eating, Heidi followed him out to a shed where he began working with his tools. Soon she saw he had made a three-legged stool like his, only with longer legs. "It's for me, I know," she said, delighted to have something of her own. Evening came, and the wind sang through the fir trees louder than ever. Soon Heidi heard a shrill whistle, and down from the heights came Peter and his goats. Heidi ran outside to see two of them come up to her grandfather and lick the salt he held in his hands, as Peter and the others disappeared down the mountainside. "Are these two ours?" Heidi asked excitedly. "Yes," said Grandfather. "Their names are White Swan and Little Bear. Go get your bowl and some bread." And when he had milked White Swan, he filled the bowl and told Heidi to eat and run off to bed. "Good night, Grandfather," Heidi called as he took his goats to the shed. A few minutes later, she climbed the ladder and hurried into her bed. Before she could spell her name, she was sleeping as happily as a princess on a silken couch. The next morning, a loud whistle woke Heidi. Hearing her grandfather's voice, she jumped up, dressed, and hurried down the ladder. There stood Peter with his goats, waiting for the uncle to join them. "Do you want to go up the mountain with Peter?" asked Grandfather. Heidi was delighted. "Then wash and tidy yourself," he said, "or the sun will laugh at you." He put a large piece of bread and cheese for Heidi into Peter's lunchbox, handed him a bowl, and said, "Milk 2 bowlfuls for her at noon, and take care she does not fall over the rocks." As they started up the mountain, Heidi dashed this way and that to look at the beautiful flowers. Sometimes she would run ahead and sit down in a field of blossoms, and Peter would have to call to know where she was. "She's as bad as the goats," he grumbled. "Now I must watch them and her too." When they came to the place where he usually halted his goats to pasture, Peter laid his lunchbox in a hollow so the wind wouldn't blow it away, and threw himself down for a nap. Heidi filled her apron with flowers, then sat down beside him. How beautiful was the snow on the peaks! How beautiful the green valley! And she had never seen so many flowers in her life. Peter's stomach soon told him it was time to eat, so he sat up and opened his lunchbox. He laid Heidi's bread and cheese to one side and his to the other. Then he filled the bowl with White Swan's milk and called Heidi. She drank 2 bowls of milk, but she broke off only a small piece of bread. The rest and the cheese she handed to Peter, saying, "You may have it." He thought at first she must be joking. When he saw that she meant it, he set to on the biggest lunch he had had in a long time. Much later, Heidi saw that the sun was casting a reddish glow over the peaks, the snow and the flowers. "Peter! Isn't it beautiful?" she cried. But Peter had no eye for sunsets. He had seen too many. "It's time to go," he said. Just then he caught sight of one of the goats, taking leaps in the direction of the cliff, and dashing up to it, lifted his stick to give it a good beating as punishment. Heidi cried out, "You have no right to touch her. It will hurt her. Let her alone." "I'll let her off if you will give me some more of your cheese tomorrow," said Peter. "You shall have it all, tomorrow and every day, but you must promise never to beat any of the goats," Heidi said. "All right," Peter promised. "I don't care." Day after day, Heidi went up the mountain with Peter and his herd. She grew healthy and brown in the sun and as carefree as the birds. At last fall came, and with it heavier and stronger winds. Often Grandfather would say, "You must stay at home today, Heidi, or the wind will blow you over the rocks." Peter did not like this. He hated to miss the extra lunch, Besides, the goats had grown so used to Heidi that they would refuse to go unless she was with them. But she did not mind staying at home. She liked following Grandfather about, watching him making cheese or working with his tools. Finally, it grew so cold that she had to put on the shoes and stockings she had hidden in the cupboard. Then one morning, a blanket of snow lay over the mountain. Now Peter and his goats stopped coming altogether, for there was not a green thing to be seen. It snowed until Heidi thought the hut would be buried in it. Then one day it stopped, and Grandfather went out to shovel paths. That afternoon there came a thump at the door, and in walked Peter. The uncle invited him to stay for supper. How Peter's eyes popped when the old man handed him some bread with a big piece of meat on it. When he had finished eating, Peter said, "I must go now. Grandmother sent word that she would like Heidi to come and see her one day." Almost as soon as Heidi was up the next morning, she announced, "I must go to see Peter's grandmother today. She will be expecting me." Grandfather told her to wait until the snow was not so deep, but each day she said the same thing. On the fourth morning, the snow was hard as ice. "All right, then," Grandfather said this time. "Come along." He wrapped Heidi in the heavy sack from her bed and dragged the sled out of the shed. Then he sat on the low seat, took Heidi on his lap, and pushed off with his foot. They shot down the mountain so fast that Heidi thought they were flying. When they reached Peter's hut, Grandfather said, "As soon as it begins to grow dark, you must come home." And he went back up the mountain. In the hut, Peter's mother was mending his coat. The old grandmother sat in the corner spinning. Heidi walked up to her and said, "Good morning, Grandmother. I've come at last." "It's the child who lives with the almuncle, isn't it?" the grandmother asked, pleased that she had come. As they talked, one of the shutters flapped against the window. "See that? It will break the window," Heidi said. "Grandfather must fix it." The grandmother said she could hear it slap and feel the old house shake, but she could not see anything, for she was blind. That made Heidi very sad. "Who can make it light for you again? Can no one do it?" she cried. It took the grandmother a long time to quiet her. Heidi stayed at the hut until Peter came home from school. "How is the reading getting on?" asked the grandmother. "Not very well," was Peter's answer. The old woman sighed. "Ah, well," she said, "I hoped you would have something different to tell me. Up there on the shelf is an old prayer book with beautiful songs in it, which I have not heard for a long time. I hope that you would soon learn enough to be able to read one of them to me sometimes." When it grew dark, Heidi said, "I must go now, but I'll come tomorrow." Grandfather met her outside, wrapped the sack around her, and carried her up the mountain. Heidi told him about the flapping shutter and the shaky house. "We must go tomorrow with the hammer and fix it," she said. "Who says so?" Grandfather wanted to know. Heidi told him that nobody had said so. She knew it herself. The grandmother lies awake when the wind blows because she is afraid the house will fall down. She is blind, too. You could help her, couldn't you? "At least we can fix the rattling," Grandfather said. And the next day, when he and Heidi went down to the hut, he took along his hammer and nails. In fact, every time he went down, he took his tools along and spent many hours making the cottage sound and tight. He would never go inside, though, even to be thanked for his work, for he did not believe people ever meant to be kind. When he was finished, the hut no longer groaned and rattled the whole night through, and the grandmother said she would never forget what the almuncle had done for her. The winter passed, summer had gone its way, and now another winter was almost over. Heidi was nearly 8, yet she had never been to school. The teacher at Dorfley sent word by Peter that she must come to school at once. Grandfather sent word back that she was not coming, now or ever. Then the pastor from the village came up to see the alm-uncle. He too said that Heidi must go to school, and that the alm-uncle should move to the village so she need not miss a day. Grandfather shook his head. The people of Dorfley despise me, and I them. It's better we live apart. My friend, if you will make your peace with God, you will see how quickly people will be friendly, the pastor replied. But the alm-uncle said he would never move to the village, and for the next few days he did not even take Heidi down to see Peter's grandmother. Then suddenly one afternoon, Deet walked into the hut, in a feathered hat and a long trailing dress. She praised Heidi's appearance, saying, "I can see she has had good care, uncle, but I know she must be in your way, so I've come to take her with me." The alm-uncle just stared at her. "Some wealthy relatives of the people I serve are looking for a companion for their young invalid daughter," she went on. "No one can say what might happen. They might even adopt—" "Have you finished?" snapped the old man. Deet was angry. "I'm responsible for my sister's child," she retorted, "and she must go to school. Everybody in Dorfley agrees with me. I advised you to think it over before letting the matter go to court." The alm-uncle's eyes flashed. "Begone with you, with your hat and feathers and such words on your tongue," he shouted, and strode out of the hut. Deet told Heidi to get her clothes quickly. "But I'm not going to leave grandfather," said the little girl. "Nonsense," said Deet. "In Frankfurt you will have all sorts of nice things." When Heidi did not move, Deet found her clothes, and taking the girl by the hand, almost dragged her down the mountain. "If you don't like it, you can come back whenever you wish," she said, as Heidi began to cry. When they reached the grandmother's hut, Heidi wanted to stop to say goodbye, but Deet would not let her. "You can bring her something nice when you come home, maybe some soft white rolls. She's too old to eat hard bread." Pleased at the thought of doing something for the grandmother, Heidi said no more and went with Deet. It was the evening of the next day when Heidi and Deet reached the home of Herr Sussman in Frankfurt and were shown to the study where Clara, the invalid daughter, lay waiting on her couch. At a small table embroidering sat Fräulein Rottenmeier, the housekeeper, with a queer-looking cap on her head. Fräulein looked Heidi over and did not seem pleased with her appearance. "Can you read?" she asked. Heidi said that she could not. Fräulein was shocked. "How old are you?" she went on. Deet answered quickly that she must be about 10. Heidi said she was 8. "8?" exclaimed Fräulein. "You know Clara is 12. I asked for a companion her own age. This child cannot even read. How could you think of bringing her to me?" "I thought she seemed made for the place," said Deet. Then, fearing there was to be trouble, she added, "I must be going now. My mistress expects me," and backed out of the room before the surprised Fräulein could try to stop her. Fräulein did not like Heidi's name either and declared, "You were baptized Adelaide, and that is what I shall call you." But Clara smiled and said, "If your name is Heidi, I will call you Heidi." She said it would be fun to have her as a companion, and was sure she would soon learn to read under her kind tutor. In spite of her unhappiness, the first thing Heidi noticed as she sat at the big table at dinner that evening was a soft white roll by her plate. She asked Sebastian, the butler, if she might have it, and when he nodded his head, she tucked it into her pocket to take to the grandmother. Fräulein said with a sigh, "I see I shall have to teach you some table manners," and she went on with a long list. But Clara laughed and said that the little girl had not heard a word. She was so tired from her long journey that she had fallen fast asleep. The next morning, when Heidi awoke, she wondered where she was. Then she remembered the big house Deet had brought her to, and jumping out of bed, ran from the window to window, trying to see grass and mountains. She saw nothing but walls. It was as though she were shut in a cage. She was dressing to run outdoors as she did at home when the maid, Tinette, knocked and said breakfast was ready. As soon as she and Clara finished eating, they went straight to the study to wait for the tutor. Clara told Heidi how kind he was, and Heidi told Clara about her grandfather and his hut and Peter. The moment the tutor arrived, Fraulein took him aside and told him that Heidi could not read. She hoped he would say that she must be sent home, but instead he said patience was all that was needed. That did not please Fraulein, but she did not dare send the little girl away of her own accord. And so Heidi began her schooling. An hour later, Fraulein heard the sound of a frightful crash in the study. She rushed into the room. On the floor lay books, inkstand, and other articles, while from beneath them a dark stream of ink was flowing all across the floor. Heidi was nowhere to be seen. She had disappeared. Fraulein ran down the stairs. There at the bottom, standing in the open doorway, was Heidi, looking in amazement up and down the street. "What are you doing? What are you thinking of to run away like that?" cried Fraulein. "I heard the sound of fir trees, but I can't see where they are, and now I can't hear them any more," answered Heidi. "Fir trees?" repeated Fraulein scornfully. "Do you suppose we are in a wood? What a silly idea. The sound you heard came from the passing carriages. Come upstairs and see the mischief you have done." Heidi followed Fraulein Rottenmeier upstairs. She was quite surprised when she saw the damage, for in her hurry she had not realized what she was doing. "I'll excuse you this time, but don't let it happen again," said Fraulein, pointing to the floor. "During your lesson time, you are to sit still and pay attention. If you don't, I shall have to tie you to the chair. Do you understand?" "Yes," replied Heidi. She had learned another rule. But for some reason, for all the tutor's patience, Heidi did not learn easily. She grew more and more unhappy, and whenever she talked with Clara, she would say, "Tomorrow I must go home to grandfather." Clara said she must wait until Herr Sussman came home. So each day Heidi put 2 more rolls in her closet to take to the old blind grandmother. In the afternoons, when Clara was resting, Heidi was left to amuse herself. One day she slipped out into the street and, with the kindly assistance of an organ grinder, set off in the direction of a tower with a golden dome which she had often seen from her window. It was a church. Heidi went in. When she came out, she was carrying a little kitten in each of her pockets. The tower keeper, whose cat had just had a new litter of kittens, had given them to her. Heidi was late for dinner that night. The others were already seated at the table. Fraulein was very cross. "You behaved very badly," she scolded, "running out of the house as you did, without asking permission, without anyone's knowing where you went, and then coming back here at such an hour." "Meow," came the answer. Fraulein became very angry. "How dare you make a joke of it?" "I did not," began Heidi. "Meow, meow." "That will do," said Fraulein. "Get up and leave the room." "But Heidi," put in Clara, "when you see that it makes Fraulein angry, why do you keep on saying meow?" "It's not I, it's the kittens in my pocket," Heidi was at last given time to say. "Kittens!" shrieked Fraulein. "Take them away!" And she rushed out of the room, while Heidi and Clara quickly arranged with Sebastian to hide the kittens in a place where Fraulein was not likely to find them. Often, when she was not playing with the kittens, Heidi would sit in her room by herself, thinking of the time when she would return to her mountains. One day she felt she could stand it no longer. She must run away. She wrapped all the rolls in her red shawl, put on her old straw hat, and got as far as the front door when Fraulein caught her. How she scolded! Heidi cried and said that she just had to go home. But Fraulein called Sebastian, and Heidi went back to her room. That night, as usual, she put a roll in her pocket, but she did not touch her dinner. A few days later, Fraulein went through Heidi's clothes closet to see what she would need before Herr Sussman came home, and she discovered the rolls. "Tinette, throw the stale bread away, and that old straw hat, too," she ordered. "No!" screamed Heidi, trying to stop her. "I must keep the hat, and the rolls are for the grandmother." But Fraulein pulled her away, and Tinette went off with the things. Heidi threw herself onto Clara's couch and wept. "Don't cry," Clara said, trying to comfort her. "You'll have fresh rolls to take to the grandmother when you go." Heidi dried her tears. That night when she went to bed, she found her old straw hat where Sebastian had hidden it under her bedspread. Happily, she hid it in a corner of her closet. Then one day there was much excitement in the house. Herr Sussman, Clara's father, had come home, and everyone was bustling about, carrying boxes from his carriage. But no sooner had he entered the house than Fraulein began to tell him about Heidi and how unfit she was to be a companion for Clara. Herr Sussman listened, asked questions, and said he would see what Clara had to say. Of course, Clara wanted Heidi to stay. That was all Herr Sussman needed to know. If Clara liked her, she must stay. Fraulein was not pleased at his decision, but Herr Sussman told her that if she could not manage, she must remember that his mother was coming soon, and she could get along with anybody. In a few days, Herr Sussman returned to Paris. Soon a letter came from his mother, telling just when she would arrive. There was so much talk about Grandmama, as Clara called her, that Heidi began calling her Grandmama too. At this, Fraulein frowned and said, "Remember, you are always to address Frau Sussman as Madam. Do you understand?" Heidi did not, but would ask no questions. She liked Clara's grandmama the moment she saw her. She liked her kind voice and her beautiful white hair. But when Heidi called her Madam, Grandmama laughed and said, "You may call me Grandmama as Clara does." That afternoon, while Clara was resting, Grandmama looked for Heidi. She was shocked to find that the little girl was alone in her room. "Bring her to me at once," she said to Fraulein. "I have some books for her." "Oh, she doesn't read," said Fraulein. "She can't even learn her ABCs." "That's strange. She doesn't look to me like a stupid child," said Grandmama. "Well, she can look at the pictures." Fraulein was about to say more, but Grandmama had turned away and gone quickly towards her own room. Heidi was delighted with the books. She liked especially the picture of a shepherd leaning on his staff, watching his flocks. But as she looked at it, she burst into tears. "Don't cry, dear child. The picture has reminded you of something," Grandmama said kindly. But for a long time, Heidi could not control her tears. When she was quiet again, Grandmama said, "How are you getting along with your lessons? Have you learned to read?" "No," answered Heidi, "but I knew before I started that it was impossible. Peter told me so. He tried and couldn't learn." "How odd Peter must be," Grandmama said. "Of course you can learn. And when you can read the story that goes with that picture, I will give you the book." She gave Heidi her first lesson that day. Grandmama knew that the little girl was unhappy, but she did not know why. Heidi would not tell her for fear she and Clara would think her ungrateful for their kindness. Grandmama told her that she must tell God about it in her prayers. He would surely help her. A sudden gleam of joy came into Heidi's eyes. "May I tell him everything? Everything?" "Yes, Heidi, everything," Grandmama said. Heidi drew away her hand, which Grandmama had been holding affectionately between her own, and said, "May I go?" "Yes, of course," was the answer, and Heidi ran off at once to her own room, and kneeling on the floor, told God that she wanted to return to her grandfather. One morning, a week or so later, the tutor asked if he might speak to Frau Sussman. "I have surprising news," he said. "Heidi can read." But if the tutor was surprised, Grandmama was not. She had found that Heidi learned easily. but she went down to the study to see for herself. There sat Heidi, reading aloud to Clara. That evening at dinner, Heidi found the book at her plate. Nothing pleased the little girl more than to be asked to read aloud. But the story that she liked best always made her the saddest. The story of the shepherd Joseph. The prodigal son, Grandmama called it. One picture showed him at home tending the sheep. The next in a strange land, lonely and forsaken. The third returning to his native land, ragged but happy to be back home again. Heidi never tired of hearing Grandmama tell this story. Every day she learned something new, to sew and make dolls' clothes, to read ever so many new stories. Still, Grandmama knew that she was not happy. One day she asked, "Have you told God about the thing that makes you unhappy?" Heidi said she had. "And do you still pray to him?" Heidi said she did not. Grandmama asked why. "It's no use," said Heidi. "For weeks I've prayed for the same thing, and he does not give it to me. But I can understand that. There must be hundreds in Frankfurt asking for things." "You must not stop praying," Grandmama said. "God will think you have forsaken him." Heidi went at once to ask God to forgive her and promised she would not forget him again. Soon it was time for Grandmama to be returning home, and when she left, how big and silent the house seemed. One afternoon, Heidi was reading aloud to Clara to pass the time when she happened upon a story about a grandmother dying. "Oh," she cried out, "then the grandmother is dead," and burst into tears. Clara explained that it was only a story and had nothing to do with the grandmother on the mountain. But Heidi, now more homesick than ever, felt that she would never see her friends again. When Fraulein heard her crying, she came and scolded her, saying, "Now that is enough of all this nonsense. If you start crying again while you are reading, I shall take the book away from you and shall not let you have it again." Heidi at once dried her tears. She could not bear to lose her dearest possession. But though she never cried again, when she read, it did not mean that she was less homesick. She grew pale and lost her appetite, and became so thin that Sebastian noticed it and tried his hardest to make her eat. But it was of no use. Heidi scarcely ate anything at all, and when she went to bed at night, she buried her face in her pillow and wept. Weeks passed. At last autumn came, then the winter, then another spring. It made no difference to Heidi. The walls and windows she looked upon showed no change, and she never went out of doors, except when Clara was well enough to be taken for a drive. Even then they went only a little way, and though they saw fine streets and large houses and crowds of people, they never saw grass and flowers or fir trees and mountains. It was these things that Heidi longed for more and more. In her lonely room, she would think of grandfather's hut, of the grandmother and Peter and the goats, the golden flowers in the sunlight, and the bright colors of the rocks at sunset. And each time she thought of them, she grew a little sadder. They seemed so far away. For days there had been mysterious happenings in the Sussman household. No matter how fast the door was barred at night, when the servants went downstairs in the morning, it was always open. It could not be a thief. Nothing was ever missing. Could it be a ghost? This thought made Fraulein so nervous that she would not go into any of the empty rooms without Tinette. Tinette would not go upstairs or down unless Sebastian went along. Sebastian never peeped into a dark corner unless John the footman were at his heels, nor would John go anywhere without Sebastian. All day long the cook would say, "That I should live to hear of such a thing." Of course, no one spoke of these things before the children. Fraulein finally persuaded Sebastian and John to sit up all night and find out who was doing the mischief. One evening they armed themselves with several weapons and took up their watch. They ate and talked and dozed. Around midnight, Sebastian tried to rouse John, but he could not. Then at 1 o'clock, John sat up and said, as though he were a man of courage, "Come, Sebastian, we must see what's going on." But as he stepped into the hall, a gust of wind blew out the candle, and he fell back against Sebastian, nearly upsetting him. When Sebastian lighted the candle again, John was as white as a ghost. "What did you see?" Sebastian asked. "It's open," gasped John, "and there's a white figure on the stairs." Shivering, they sat down and did not stir from their seats until daybreak. Then they went out and closed and barred the door and hastened to tell Fraulein of their experience. Fraulein could stand the strain of this mystery no longer. She wrote that very day to Herr Sussman about it, asking him to come at once. But Herr Sussman had his own ideas about ghosts. "You and the servants should be able to solve this mystery," he replied. "If not, write for my mother to come. She is not afraid of anything." So Fraulein wrote to Frau Sussman. Frau Sussman answered that she had no intention of returning to look for a ghost. "If there's one in the house, it must be alive, and you ought to be able to deal with it, Rottenmeier," she wrote. Now Fraulein was angry. Herr Sussman must come home, and she knew a way to bring him. She wrote him that the ghost was making Clara more and more nervous, and that she might become very ill unless something were done about it. He came on the next train. Herr Sussman suspected Sebastian of playing tricks on Fraulein, and began at once to question him. But he soon saw that Sebastian was as frightened as Fraulein. So he sent for his friend, the doctor who attended Clara, and that night they took up their watch in the same room in which Sebastian and John had waited. They lighted a candle and laid their loaded revolvers between them. Then they talked and waited until the clock struck 12, then 1, and then they heard the bar of the outer door being lifted. "Who's there?" roared the doctor, opening the door. A little white figure turned. It was Heidi, barefooted and shivering. "What are you doing here, child?" asked the kindly doctor. Heidi did not know. The doctor lifted her in his arms, carried her upstairs, and put her in her bed. When she stopped trembling, he asked if she had been dreaming. "Yes," she said. "I dream every night of being at home with grandfather, but when I wake in the morning, I am always in my bed in Frankfurt." When the doctor heard this, he said, "Go to sleep now, Heidi. Everything will be all right tomorrow." He went downstairs and told Herr Sussman she must go back at once to her mountains. "She's sick and thin as a skeleton." Herr Sussman was shocked that this should have happened in his house without anyone's noticing it. "But first we must make her sound and strong," he protested. "Her illness cannot be cured by pills," the doctor said, adding that if she were sent home at once, she might recover in the mountain air. Herr Sussman understood and agreed. At daybreak, he went upstairs and awakened Fraulein and the servants. "Come down at once," he ordered. "We must prepare for a journey." Frightened, they jumped out of their beds. Had the ghost attacked the master, and were they being called to his assistance? With pale faces, they crept into the dining room. John was sent for the carriage, Sebastian to bring Diet to the house, Tinette to wake Heidi and dress her. Just then Fraulein came into the room, so befuddled that she had put her cap on backwards. Herr Sussman told her to get out a trunk and pack all Heidi's things in it, and a good part of Clara's, too. Meanwhile, he would go up to wake his daughter and break the news to her. Clara was distressed at losing her companion, but when her father explained that Heidi was homesick, she understood. "Just let Heidi's trunk be brought in here, so that I may put in some things for her," she said. Sebastian returned with Diet at his heels in a great state of excitement. Why was Heidi being sent home? As for herself, she was sorry, but she could not get away just now. Her mistress needed her. She was thinking of Uncle's last words to her, and did not want to see him again. So Sebastian was put in charge of the little girl on her journey. "When you stop at the hotel tonight," Herr Sussman warned him, "be sure her windows are fastened, so that they cannot be easily opened. After Heidi is in bed, lock the door of her room on the outside, for she walks in her sleep and might hurt herself if she went wandering downstairs and tried to open the front door. Do you understand?" "So that was it!" Sebastian exclaimed, remembering the open door. "Yes," said Herr Sussman, "and you are all idiots for not finding it out for yourselves." And with that, Herr Sussman went off to his study to write a letter to the Almunkel. Perhaps Heidi was the most surprised of all at being called so early in the morning. Tinette put on her best dress without telling her why. When Herr Sussman explained that she was going back to her grandfather, she was too excited to eat. She ran up to Clara's room to wait for the carriage. "See what I've put in the trunk for you?" cried Clara, pointing to it in the middle of the room. Then she showed her dresses and aprons and handkerchiefs and lovely things. "And look here," she added, as she held up a basket. Inside were 12 soft white rolls for the grandmother. Heidi had never been happier. Someone announced that the carriage was ready, and Heidi ran to her room to get her book from under her pillow. Then she took her shawl from the closet, put her old hat in it, and placed the two on top of her basket. Fraulein tried to take the shawl from her, but Herr Sussman said she might keep it. Soon Heidi was on her way to the train, the basket of rolls on her knees. "Are you sure the grandmother is not dead?" she kept asking Sebastian. "I don't see why she should be," he would answer, and Heidi would be comforted for a while. When they reached Mayenfeld, Sebastian found a man with a cart who agreed to take Heidi to Dorfli. "I can go by myself from here," Heidi said. Sebastian paid the man well for his trouble, then handed the little girl a package for herself and a letter for her grandfather from Herr Sussman, and told her to take good care not to lose them. She put them in her basket under the rolls. The peaks looked down on Heidi like old friends, and the trees seemed to wave a welcome home. She thought the cart would never reach Dorfli, but at last it stopped, and she dumped out, still holding her basket. "Thank you," she said to the man. "Grandfather will come for the trunk tomorrow." Would she find the grandmother by the spinning wheel? She kept asking herself that question as she hurried up the steep path. At last she saw the little hut in the hollow and ran in, calling, "Grandmother, grandmother, I'm back!" The grandmother was too surprised to speak, but when she put her hand on Heidi's hair, she said, "It is indeed the little girl. God has granted my prayer." Heidi laid the rolls in the old woman's lap. "There, grandmother," she said. "Now you won't have to eat hard bread for days." Peter's mother was as surprised and happy as the grandmother was to see Heidi. "What a pretty hat you have on," she said. "You shall have it, for I do not need it any more," said Heidi. She put on the old hat that she had worn when she went away. She remembered what grandfather had said about Deet and her feathers. Then she took off her pretty dress and put on her old shawl. "I want grandfather to see me as I used to be, so he will surely know me," she said, and hurried up the mountain. How good it was to be home again. Everything was even more beautiful than she had remembered it. At last she saw the tops of the fir trees, then the roof of her grandfather's hut, then the whole of it. There before it, as in the old days, sat grandfather puffing away at his pipe. Heidi dropped her basket and rushed to him, flinging her arms around his neck. "Grandfather, grandfather," was all she could say. The old man took Heidi on his knees and looked at her. "Did they send you away?" he asked. "Oh, no, grandfather. They were very kind. I just wanted to come back to you. I think it's all in the letter," she said, handing it and the package to him. But he gave the package back, saying, "That's yours." The letter he read and put in his pocket. "Now you must have some milk," grandfather said, rising to go inside. "Bring the package with you. There is money in it for you. You can buy a nice bed and bedclothes and dresses for a couple of years with it." I don't want the money. I have a bed, and Clara gave me plenty of dresses, Heidi said. Take it and put it in the cupboard. You will want it some day, I have no doubt. Heidi obeyed and skipped happily after her grandfather into the house. She looked into every corner of the room. Then she ran up the ladder to the loft above. Oh, Grandfather, my bed's gone, she said. Grandfather said they would make another. Later, as they sat at the table eating, Heidi said, Grandfather, this is the best milk in the world. The old man smiled. So you're back again, exclaimed Peter when he came with the goats. Will you go up the mountain tomorrow? Not tomorrow, but the day after, perhaps, said Heidi, for tomorrow I must go down to see the grandmother. That night, Grandfather went up the ladder a dozen times to make sure Heidi was not going to walk in her sleep, as Herr Sussman wrote she had done in Frankfurt. But Heidi was resting well. She was in her own mountains again with her grandfather, happier than she had been since she left. The next morning, Grandfather went to Dorfli for the trunk, while Heidi stopped at Peter's hut to see how the grandmother liked her rolls. I believe they have made me stronger already, the old woman told her with a grateful smile. I shall write Clara to send you more when these are gone, Heidi promised. Then she thought of the money Herr Sussman had given her. She would use that to buy more rolls. No, I cannot let you. It's your money, the grandmother said. But Heidi was determined. She was sure if the grandmother grew strong, she would be able to see again. Shall I read you one of the hymns from your book? Heidi asked a moment later. The grandmother could hardly believe a child so young could read when Peter did not know one word from another. But Heidi got the book off the shelf and read until the old woman's face was alight with joy. Then Grandfather knocked at the window. Heidi left, promising to come back the next day. When she told her grandfather that she wanted to use her money to buy rolls for the grandmother, he asked, But what about your bed? It would be nice to have a proper bed. Heidi replied that she slept better on hay than on her fine bed in Frankfurt. The money is yours. Do what you like with it, he agreed then. For a while they walked along in silence. Suddenly, Heidi said, Everything has turned out as Grandmama said it would. If I had come home when I wanted to, the grandmother would have had only a few rolls, and I would not have been able to read to her. I'm glad God did not let me have what I asked for at once. Now I shall always pray to God, and when He does not do anything I ask, for I shall think to myself, perhaps He is going to do something better still. We will pray every day now, won't we, and never forget Him again. What if one has forgotten God? Asked Grandfather. Then everything goes wrong. Grandmama told me so, Heidi answered. And people say you ran away from God when He would have helped you if you had let Him. But if we have forgotten God, we cannot go back, Grandfather murmured. Oh, yes, we can. There's a story in my book that explains it. When they reached home, she got down her book and read the story aloud. It was of the prodigal son, who, when he had wasted his life and money, went back to his father and was forgiven. You see, said Heidi, we can go back. That night, as she lay asleep, Grandfather stood looking at her a long time. Then he prayed, Father, I have sinned against God and man. I am not worthy to be called thy son. Early the next morning, Grandfather called up to Heidi, Put on your best dress and come down. We're going to church. She was too surprised to ask any questions, but it did not take her long to get ready. When she came down the ladder, there stood Grandfather in a coat with shining silver buttons. Grandfather, she cried, I've never seen you look so nice. As they walked down the mountain, the church bells rang out from the valley below, and the nearer they walked, the sweeter was the music. By the time they reached the church, the congregation had gathered and was singing. Women turned to look and lost their places in their books. See that, they whispered. The almuncle has come to church. The pastor was happy indeed. When the services were over, Grandfather took Heidi to the pastor's home. Then how the people talked. Maybe he's not so bad after all, some said. See how he takes the little one by the hand? The alm uncle announced he was going to follow the pastor's advice and move to Dorfli the next winter so that Heidi could go to school. The pastor was pleased and shook his hand warmly. Now the congregation too went up to shake hands, each trying to be first. And when the alm uncle told them he was going to move to Dorfli for the winter, they walked halfway up the mountain with him. Grandfather, you just look nicer and nicer today, Heidi said when they were alone. He smiled. It is good to be at peace with God and man, he said. God was good when he sent you to my hut. This time, when they reached Peter's house, the two walked in together. Good morning, grandmother, said Uncle. That I should live to see such a thing, exclaimed the surprised old woman. May God reward you for all you have done for me, and if I have ever injured you, do not punish me by sending the child away again while I live. Have no fear, said Uncle. Just then Peter rushed in with a letter for Heidi, the first she had ever had. It was from Clara. She told her how they missed her in Frankfurt and promised the next summer she and Grandmama would come to visit her. Grandmama, she wrote, is sending some coffee to go with the grandmother's rolls. There was such excitement in all this news that no one noticed how the time was passing, until Uncle reminded Heidi they must be going home. Come again soon, said Grandmother. And Uncle promised they would, the very next day. As he and Heidi climbed up the mountain toward home, the evening chimes rang out like a lovely song. Heidi was happier than she had been in all her life, and so I think was her grandfather. The end.